Question 1. Given the circumstances, Maria is upgrading a legacy Forms 6 application that heavily depends on all integration for client-side automation. She needs to ensure the solution remains functional after migrating to Forms 9i in a web deployment context. What is the most robust approach? A. Replace all integration with WebUtil's client-side Java classes for equivalent functionality, but UPGC to simulate all behavior in the web runtime. C. Maintain all calls directly via the SQL libraries after migration. D. Invoke all via database-side Java stored procedures. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Migrating OLED from client-server to web requires replacing them with web-compatible mechanisms. WebUtil provides built-in support for invoking client-side automation securely via Java, overcoming browser sandbox restriction. PGCS can customize UI but aren't optimal for all replacement. SQL all calls fail in web runtime. Database Java procedures cannot directly interact with browser client. Question 2. From a practical standpoint, when configuring the Forms web CFG for multiple runtime environments, which approach best prevents cross-environment conflicts during deployment? A. Use a single configuration section and dynamically set parameters of a URL. B. Create separate named configuration sections for each environment with isolated parameter sets. C. Rely solely on the default configuration section and override parameters of runtime. D. Modify the base configuration file on each deployment to reflect current environment settings. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Defining separate name configurations in Forms web CFG for each environment ensures parameter isolation, reducing risk of accidental overrides. Dynamic URL parameters single config can cause security leaks and errors. The default section isn't environment-specific. Manual edits per deployment increase human error and deployment downtime. Question 3. When analyzing the use of JDAPI for mass updates to form modules, which practice ensures that bulk property changes do not corrupt the module? A. Apply JDAPI updates directly to the runtime loaded module in memory. B. Modify the MB source files in a control batch process before compiling. C. Perform JDAPI modifications while the module is being edited in Forms Builder. D. Use JDAPI exclusively in a database SQL lock for real-time updates. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. JDAPI is intended for design time manipulation of MB modules. Executing changes within Forms Builder ensures the environment tracks modifications and can regenerate binary artifacts properly. Direct runtime edits risk corruption, and SQL locks cannot host JDAPI operations. Updating MB outside the builder without proper context increases errors. Question 4. As illustrated by Ravi's migration project, he must ensure that database session pooling minimizes idle session resource usage while allowing quick reconnections. Which configuration best achieves this in Oracle Forms services? A. Use session persistence with fixed pool size equal to peak connections. B. Enable connection pooling with configurable idle timeouts and session reuse. C. Disable pooling entirely to avoid session mix-ups between users. D. Implement database side connection sharing using DIP instead of Forms pooling. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Forms connection pooling allows idle sessions to be released while reusing them for new requests, balancing performance and resource usage. Fixed pool sizes waste resources. Disabling pooling negates performance gain. RCP is database side pooling and does not directly integrate with Forms runtime session reuse. Question 5. In the modern context of integrating custom client features, which scenario most warrants using a Java being over in a Forms 9i? Customizing the visual style of a Forms item beyond default properties. B. Executing a file upload operation from the client machine to the server. C. Adding a context-sensitive pop-up menu in the Forms runtime interface. D. Implementing a new canvas type within the runtime window. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Java beans are well suited for embedding functional components such as custom menus with full integration via the fbean package PGCS modify or extend existing UI controls, appearance, or behavior. File uploads are better handled with WebUtil. New canvas types aren't supported directly via Java Bean or EJC. Question 6. Throughout the course of performance tuning, a large web-based forms application which adjustment most effectively reduces initial load time without degrading runtime interactivity. A. Reduce the number of preloaded libraries by using dynamic loading for non-essential components. B. Increase the maximum JEM heap size on all client machines. C. Minimize the SQL lock size by breaking procedures into smaller units. D. Configure the forms listener servlet to compress all network traffic. Answer. Correct answer, D. Explanation. Network compression via a forms listener servlet reduces initial and ongoing data transfer size, improving load times. Dynamic loading can help, but compression addresses broader latency issues. A JVM heap size affects client processing, but not initial load. Smaller PSQL locks are maintainability improvements, not load speed optimizations. Question 7. Contrary to popular belief, migrating Forms 6c triggers to 9i web runtime without modification often fails because A. Trigger timing properties have fundamentally changed in the web environment. B. Certain built-in packages and client-side triggers are incompatible with the servlet architecture. C. Web deployment enforces all triggers to execute on the server only. D. The migration tool automatically removes unsupported triggers. Answer. Correct answer, B. Explanation. Some client-side triggers and built-in packages in Forms 6c relied on direct client OS access, which isn't supported in web runtime. The servlet architecture executes these on the server or through secure client APIs. Trigger timing remains mostly compatible. The migration tool flags unsupported code but does not delete triggers. Question 8. Taking into account Ahmed's requirement to integrate browser navigation controls with Forms application, which technique provides stable and supported method A. Intercepting browser events with custom JavaScript injected into the runtime HTML. B. Using the JavaScript integration features built into Forms9i to bind browser events to Forms logic. C. Embedding an ActiveX control in the browser to detect navigation actions. D. Modifying the Forms listener servlet to handle browser command hooks. Answer. Correct answer, C. Explanation. Forms9i offers JavaScript integration, but stable browser navigation control is best achieved with a supported platform-specific approach like ActiveX for IE environments or equivalent plugins. Direct JavaScript injection risks instability. Listener servlet changes don't manage browser-level events. Pure Forms JavaScript hooks have limitations in controlling browser navigation. Question 9. The foundation of secure WebUtil file transfers lies in A. Encrypting data using SALS between client and server. B. Using obfuscated Java code in WebUtil to prevent tampering. C. Replacing the WebUtil jar with IDEA performs encryption. D. Relying on operating system level permissions without transport encryption. Answer. Correct answer, C. Explanation. Secure WebUtil operations depend on transport layer security SALS, ensuring files are encrypted during transfer. Obfuscation protects code but not data. JCS aren't used for WebUtil encryption. OS permissions limit file access locally but do not protect data in transit. Question 10. By evaluating new Forms builder-eyed enhancements which change most improves developer productivity in Oracle Forms 9a. Automatic synchronization between property palette changes and SQL editor content. B. Enhanced object navigator search with filtering by property and type. C. Built-in real-time database schema diagramming. D. Dynamic module compilation without manual rebuilds. Answer. Correct answer, B. Explanation. The enhanced search in the object navigator allows developers to locate components by property and type, saving time in large applications. Automatic sync between property changes SQL content isn't new feature. Schema diagramming isn't part of Forms Builder. Dynamic compilation still requires explicit actions. Question 11. With the advent of time zone support in Forms 9i, how should global applications handle data-time data entry to ensure accuracy across regions? A. Store all timestamps in Tutter and convert to local time zones on display. B. Store timestamps in the user's local time zone without conversion. C. Store multiple versions of each timestamp for every supported time zone. D. Store only date values and let the application infer the time zone context. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Storing integers. A best practice for cross-region applications as it avoids ambiguity during daylight saving changes and simplifies synchronization. Local storage risks mismatches, multiple copies create redundancy, and omitting the time zone leads to data inconsistency. Question 12. Historically speaking, why does the Forms Listener Servlet replace the Forms Server socket mode in web deployments? A. It allows direct client-to-database connections without middleware. B. It ensures communication is RIP.TT, approving firewall compatibility. C. It reduces the need for Forms runtime engine processes. D. It removes the need for the application server entirely. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. The listener servlet levied bypassing firewall restrictions and enabling standard web traffic routing. Direct DB connections would break security layers. Runtime processes are still needed. The application server remains essential for deployment. Question 13. By comparing WebUtil and direct Java BN approaches, which advantage does WebUtil provide for file system access? A. It can bypass client OS permissions to ensure file operations succeed. B. It includes pre-built Java classes and LSQLPs that integrate securely with Forms. C. It avoids the need for any signed jar files for client-side operations. D. It can execute file operations entirely on the server without client involvement. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. WebUtil offers secure, signed, pre-built Java classes with PLSQL integration for file operations. It cannot bypass OS permissions, still requires signed jars, and is designed for client-side, not purely server-side operations. Question 14. The general consensus is that configuring Forms session failover in Oracle Application Server primarily depends on A. Enabling dynamic runtime module recompilation. B. Storing session state in the middle tier rather than in the database. C. Synchronizing session state across multiple Forms runtime processes. D. Disabling caching for all Forms modules. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Failover requires sharing session state among runtime processes to ensure continuity after a crash. Storing state solely in the middle tier is not enough if not shared. Dynamic recompilation and disabling caching are unrelated to failover functionality. Question 15. While examining the use of record groups to populate loves dynamically, which step ensures the love displays the latest data without recompiling the form? A. Define the love query statically within the love object. B. Populate a record group programmatically at runtime and associate it with the love. C. Use database views with cached results to back the love. D. Define the love to query from a fixed record group loaded at startup. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Populating record groups at runtime ensures fresh data without recompilation. Static love definitions require module changes for updates. Cached views and fixed startup record groups don't guarantee up-to-date results. Question 16. In light of recent developments, a Forms 9i project team wants to debug complex SQL code directly from the client browser session, which built-in feature supports this. A. Enhanced Object Navigator search filters. B. Integrated debug console with breakpoints and step execution. C. Database profiler integration from Forms runtime. D. Rhodesia Plus session attachment. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. The debug console allows setting breakpoints, stepping through code, and inspecting variables during runtime from the browser session. Navigator searches for design time. Profiler integration is separate, and SEO Plus attachment is not a Forms feature. Question 17. Under the assumption that security is A priority, which measure is most effective to prevent unauthorized client-side code execution in a forms application. A. Signing all client-side jar files with a trusted certificate. B. Obfuscating ESL source code before deployment. C. Using Java beans exclusively for all client logic. D. DisLHET to reduce encryption overhead. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Signing jars ensures only verified code runs on the client. Obfuscation protects intellectual property but not execution safety. Java beans aren't inherently secure without signing. DisLHET compromises security. Question 18. As evidenced by Mark's attempt to integrate forms with an external reporting system, which method is most aligned with supported Oracle oracle9i practices? A. Calling external reports using run report object with URL-based delivery. B. Embedding report output directly into the object navigator. C. Writing report generation logic entirely in ESQL without using report server. D. Deploying reports as SATI HTML pages and linking them via web show document. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Run report object with report server is the supported method for integrating reports with forms, enabling dynamic parameter passing and various output formats. Navigator embedding is impossible. PySQL lacks rich output capabilities and STAT HTML lacks interactivity. Question 19. When faced with integrating browser-side alerts into a forms runtime session, which mechanism offers both security and maintainability? A. Embedding JavaScript directly into the generated form HTML files. B. Using the web show document built into call a secure HTML JavaScript page. C. Modifying the forms listener servlet to inject custom script tags. D. Creating a database trigger to send alert content to the browser. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Alerts tied to data changes are best triggered server-side, with forms logic invoking a secure controlled delivery mechanism. Deck HTML edits and servlet modifications are unsupported and risk upgrade issues. Web show document is for navigation, not real-time alerting. Question 20. In terms of application server integration, which deployment strategy maximizes scalability for high user loads? A. Running all runtime processes on a single middle-tier instance. B. Using a cluster application server configuration with load balancing. C. Hosting forms modules directly in the database for execution. D. Deploying a separate application server instance for each user group without clustering. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Clustering with load balancing distributes workloads and provides failover, improving scalability and reliability. Single instance setups limit scalability. Database hosting of forms modules is unsupported, and separate unclustered instances waste resources without improving balance. Question 21. In response to the challenge of integrating oracle9i with an external authentication service, which approach ensures compatibility and avoids modifying core forms runtime components? A. Use single sign-on integration provided by Oracle Application Server. B. Embed authentication logic directly into each forms trigger. C. Modify the forms listener servlet to handle login requests. D. Add a Java bean to capture and validate user credentials client-side. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Leveraging Oracle Application Server's built-in single sign-on ensures security and maintainability without hacking core forms components. Hard-coding login logic into triggers is brittle, servlet changes are unsupported, and Java bean credential capture risks bypassing centralized security. Question 22. Examining the consequences of misconfigured browser integration in oracle9i, which symptom most strongly indicates an issue with the HTML generation phase? A. The forms module compiles but fails to connect to the database. B. The runtime output fails to launch or displays a blank browser window. C. Trigger execution audit changes unexpectedly. D. PSQL locks execute slower than normal. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation HTML generation errors in browser integration directly affect the runtime app at loading, causing blank screens or launch failures. DB connection failures stem from network or credential issues. Trigger order changes are unrelated, and SQL slowness is typically a server-side or query tuning issue. Question 23. The common thread among successful pluggable Java component PJC deployments in Forms9i is A. Compiling PJCS with the exact Java version used by the Forms client environment. B. Use PJCS exclusively for database-side processing tasks. C. Deploying PJCS without signing to reduce load time. D. Embedding PJCS directly into the database schema. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation PJCS must be compiled for the correct client JVM version to ensure compatibility. They are intended for UI enhancements, not EBA-side processing. Unsigned PJCS fail in security-restricted environments. Embedding PJCS a database is unsupported. Question 24. When evaluating the merits of different deployment configurations, which setup best balances security and manageability for Forms work? CFG A. Encrypt the entire configuration file to prevent any editing. B. Store sensitive parameters in a separate restricted access configuration file. C. Move all configuration values into the database for easier querying. D. Keep parameters in plain text for quick troubleshooting. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. Separating sensitive parameters into a restricted access file prevents unauthorized viewing while keeping general parameters manageable. Full encryption makes troubleshooting difficult. Moving config to the DB breaks native Forms behavior. Plaintext for all parameters compromises security. Question 25. The primary reason for configuring multiple runtime pools in Forms services is A. To provide different memory allocations for various modules. B. To allow simultaneous execution of different versions of the same form. C. To separate user groups with distinct performance and resource requirements. D. To simplify debugging by isolating problematic sessions. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Multiple runtime pools allow isolating workloads based on performance needs, preventing resource contention, while pools may incidentally aid debugging. Memory allocation and versioning can be handled differently without separate pools. Question 26. Given the circumstances, HANA must integrate a Forms9i module with a third-party messaging system without directly exposing the database. Which method is most secure and maintainable? A. Use Forms to call a middle-tier service that handles messaging API interactions. B. Embed the messaging API object directly into database stored procedures. C. Install the third-party messaging software on each client machine. D. Write a Java bean that directly connects to the messaging system from the client. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. A middle-tier service isolates the database from the messaging system, centralizing integration logic and security. DB procedures tie messaging logic to the DB layer unnecessarily. Client installations are hard to manage, and direct client Java bean connections bypass central control. Question 27. In contrast to Forms 6i, the 9i WebUtil library improves client file operations primarily by A. Allowing unrestricted access to any local directory without configuration. B. Providing signed Java libraries with PLSUL wrappers for secure file handling. C. Storing client files temporarily on the application server for processing. D. Converting file operations to database blob storage automatically. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. WebUtil enables secure client file operations through signed jars and SQL integration controlling access. It doesn't grant unrestricted file access, store client files on the server by default, or force blob storage for all operations. Question 20. When presented with a performance bottleneck during Forms startup, which technique most directly addresses slow initial downloads in Forms9i? Minimize the number of EGCS and Java beans loaded at startup. B. Disable compression in the listener servlet. C. Pre-compile SQL libraries into the database. D. Use a single large jar file containing all required components. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Reducing the number of PGCS and Java beans at startup decreases the amount of client-side code that must be downloaded before the form launches. Disabling compression worsens load times. Precompiling ESQL helps runtime performance but not download speed. And a single large jar still requires downloading its full size. Question 29. To illustrate this point, why is the Forms Migration Assistant a critical tool when upgrading from Forms 6i to 9i? It automatically rewrites business logic into Java code for the web. B. It identifies and converts client-server dependent features into web-compatible equivalents. C. It removes all unsupported triggers without user intervention. D. It merges multiple FMB files into a single deployable module. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. The Migration Assistant scans for client-server dependencies like old and suggests or applies web-compatible changes. It does not write business logic into Java, delete triggers automatically, or merge forms into one module. Question 30. Across different scenarios, which practice is most important when deploying Forms 9i applications to browsers with varying JVM versions? A. Standardize on a minimum support JVM version and ensure all clients use it. B. Embed multiple jar versions in the deployment to match client JVMs. C. Let the browser auto-select the best available JVM version. D. Compile forms for the latest JVM regardless of client compatibility. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Standardizing on a support JEM version ensures predictable behavior and avoids runtime compatibility issues. Multiple embedded jars complicate maintenance. Browser auto-selection can cause incompatibility. Compiling for the latest JVM may break older clients.